Is an energy analyst and a senior research associate at the Australia Institute. He's also the author of the book Windfall. It examines the politics of energy transition. He's joining us live from Oslo. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. I just want to ask you, first of all, about the situation we have currently in the Strait of Hormuz. The world is facing an energy and economic crisis as a result of the blockades we have seen there. Now we're seeing a few ships apparently authorized by the US, making their way backwards and forwards through the strait. Is that going to make much of a difference, do you think?
It is remarkable seeing the chart of the change in traffic flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. When the conflict began, we saw a major drop-off, and it has only been a very small trickle since then. And I strongly suspect that what we will see is either a continuation of that trickle or perhaps even a reduction in the volume of ships flowing through that region. It also, what we're seeing in the past few days, raises the tensions in that region quite significantly. Nervousness from insurers and I guess the personnel of these ships will continue. So this is by no means a return to normal.
Oil, if I understand it correctly, is, and I appreciate, of course, you're not an economist, but I know widely you do study this. Oil is usually bought through the long-term markets, through the future markets, so the prices are already set, the money is already transferred, other than being bought on the spot market. Now, the intention of the US is to try to throttle the amount of business that Iran does. In your experience, do you think that this action is likely to do that?
Look, this is something that I think we're trying to infer from their actions what the plan is. But I think in general, what we're seeing is that the power of the United States, particularly the power of the petrodollar or revenues from fossil fuel sales, is reducing. And this is something we're seeing shift towards more power coming from regions selling electric technologies like electric vehicles and wind power. So this whole idea of a tactic of trying to throttle Iran and increase the revenue of American fossil fuel sales and increase their power through those means, I don't think it's playing out in that way. Specifically around oil prices, what we're seeing is small day-to-day variations that kind of respond to statements made by the president of the US. But the long-term trend that we're seeing over the past few weeks and now months, and this conflict has been going on for a while, is that the price just keeps going up and up. And this is probably going to at least continue for another few weeks, if not months. So that plan, it doesn't seem like a good one.
I mentioned you'd written a book examining the politics of energy transition. Now, I remember back after the 1970s oil crisis, there was a massive spike in the amount of investment that was made in sustainable energy sources. Now, that has, to some degree, it certainly leveled off and then began to drop away a little bit more. Are we seeing a similar sort of thing this time? Or do you think we're beginning to see a fundamental change in the way that the world views its energy sources?
There are two really important differences between this crisis and the crises of the 1970s. The first one is very simply that the technologies that are available to us now are cheaper, they're more ubiquitous, and we already have familiarity with them. And so this creates a very large amount of potential. But the other difference we're seeing is that there is a very large amount of tax cuts, subsidies, and environmental regulation rollbacks that we're seeing, which works against the energy transition and works to increase reliance on fossil fuels at a time when we should be decreasing reliance on fossil fuels. So it's very hard to say how it's going to play out. The most important part of those two factors is that the potential for an increase in the pace of the energy transition is high, and it's higher than it has been for the previous fossil fuel crisis we've seen, not just in the 1970s, but the previous crises of this decade as well.
We've seen some countries who are said to have been expecting this kind of crisis for some time. China's a good example of that, we understand that it was essentially stockpiling oil in the event that something like this would happen. Do you think there's a risk that because of the fractures in the oil economy that we've seen as a result of the war in Iran, that is going to happen more often, and there are going to be more countries who are essentially stockpiling and therefore controlling more greatly the oil supply, and thus, of course, making it more difficult for other countries to get access to it?
Yes, this is something that happened, I guess, with the 2022 energy crisis as well. Europe, of course, captured a lot of the gas supply. It was trying to replace gas that it was purchasing from Russia, and that contributed to shortages in Asia. And I don't think that is a great approach to this challenge. I think that these crises will become more and more common. There will be less time in between these crises. And so stockpiling will only really go so far. And of course, it creates those inequities that you hinted at in your question. What is far better is to reduce the need for fossil fuels and reduce even the need for stockpiles as well. That has the effect of a more fair approach. And of course, regions that cannot afford to stop using fossil fuels will have more access to cheaper fossil fuels when they need it. So I think that is a better approach. I don't think that you're wrong in your question, though. I think that there will be that response of stockpiling, and I hope it's something we see less of.
Keaton Joshi is an energy analyst at the Australia Institute. We appreciate you being with us on Al Jazeera. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.